Hello, everybody. It is October 7th, 2024 at 7:01 p.m. EST. You're watching episode 45 of the Dovecote with Jay Dragon. Jay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Jay Dragon. I am a tabletop RPG designer and editorial director at Possum Creek Games. You might know my work from Wanderhome, Usaba's Bed and Breakfast, or the upcoming and highly hyped up by
Mm-hmm.
people who have fallen into my wizard trap, Seven-Part Pact. And yeah, I'm a girl. I make games in Philadelphia, and I'm here to hang out.
Yeah, how does it feel to have? Because I see it every once in a while, and it tends to have effects. Like people get drawn into Seven Part Pact in a
Yeah,
really real way.
it's one of those things where I don't know if like Seven Part Pact I think is a it feels really relieving because Seven Part Pact the act of working on it, for those who don't know, it's my game that's like my current, as Rowan described it in a recent Rascals article, it is my current magnum opus. It is a 160K abomination of a project that's an intricate model of seven powerful wizards, that is both about the fantasy of being a wizard in intricate detail and also about patriarchy and power and hierarchy and manipulation. And I love it, and it has been my passion and also my obsession for the past couple of years. And um, it is, I have like the wizard madness, right? Like it has given me the wizard madness, and it feels so relieving when I show it to my friends, and they come away from it frothing and screaming and clawing at the walls, and they now have the wizard madness because it feels like, okay, thank God, right? Like I'm not just locked away in a little box making this thing forever. No one will care. It's like I'm making a thing that is going to, if nothing else, drive 20 gay people into an asylum, you know?
Yeah, 21 probably, because it's
Oh,
seven. Anyway,
oh, right, of
anyways,
course, of course. Yeah, they need to be able to form three complete packs, so they're gonna
yeah,
find a 21st. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. I think um, how do I say this? I think there's an interesting dynamic in TTRPGs where there's a lot of hype for and around games that people, and I am like as much a proprietor and victim and creator of
Mm-hmm.
this dynamic as anyone else, but like
Mm-hmm.
people talk about games, but they don't necessarily read or play them. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
and so I imagine that seeing people being like, "Wow, I read this whole thing in a night, and I'm like extremely compelled by it," is like
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool.
Well, I think that's also maybe a thing that I've been really falling into, is that like I'm not interested really in making games where people are gonna hype it up without ever touching it. Like for me, like what I'm and like there's something really nice about Senpai being trapped in kind of eternal playtest mode right now, right?
Hmm.
Where it's like if you want to play it, if you want to access it, you kind of have to jump through some hoops, which gives it a little bit of an esoteric quality. And it means that everyone who's hyping it up are people who have engaged with it, right? People who have like dug deep into my work, who are really excited about it. And so in that sense, it kind of I think it feels nice to be making things that kind of force people to like it's really hard, I think, to sit passively by with a lot of, I don't know, like I think that's something I'm proud of and I'm happy with how it's been going, is the sense that like this is a game that you get excited about because you played it with me, right? Or because you played it in general, right? This is a game you get excited about because you sat down and read it in a night, because you consumed it and it consumed you. A quick sidebar: we never should have let the influencers steal consume. Consume is far
Hmm.
too horny of a word to be used by content creators. Regardless, I think that, I don't know. Like I think there is something important about like games that demand consumption in that way, and it's hard, you can't quite get there ever with a published thing. 'Cause once it's published, the hype machine exists outside you. But I like it when games in their moment can grab hold of you.
Yeah, I very much agree. Something that's interesting. This is going to be a very interviewer asked question that I'm about to ask. I think specifically a
Awesome.
journalism a journalism major asked question.
Awesome.
But
Awesome.
the last time we talked, you were at the end of the Useba's press cycle, basically. kind of leading into the printing for that, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
I think so.
And
Yeah, probably.
now you're kind of in the 7-part packed pre-press cycle almost in some
Yeah,
ways.
yeah.
Like how is I guess like um how is talking about 7-part pack now like different
Well,
from
so
how it
what's
was then? How's it the
interesting.
same?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that with Yazeba's, by all rights, I should be in the Yazeba's press cycle right now. If I could sell Yazeba's on my storefront, I would be. Possum Creek's going through some challenges. We're having some ups and downs. I don't want to talk about them here. You'll hear about them eventually, and hopefully I'll be very excited when I get to tell you how things conclude. But the long and short of it is that in the current moment. I'm not really in a good position to like be hawking my older stuff. And so to distract myself from the stress of kind of all the business stuff I've been dealing with, throwing myself wholly into Wizards. And then a lot of the conversations I've been having around it aren't like I'm not like putting on my marketing hat and being like Eclipse, it's important for the Possum Creek brand for us to do this talk. No, I'm like Eclipse, you're my friend. And I want to talk about this thing that I know you're also interested in and that I'm obsessed with, and I want to talk about it. So there's I think an organic quality there, right? Like, but also there's just a sense of like, I don't know, it feels nice to be engaging with my work not as a byproduct of marketing, right? Where I'm not sitting here being like, I have to sell you 7-part pack. Like that's not what I'm doing. I'm not really concerned about selling 7-part pack right now. I know like there are people I am selling it to, and it is no one who's listening to this, right? Like the conversation around what it means to sell that game is just different than it's been for my other stuff, which is another thing I can't talk about.
Hmm.
But it's the sort of thing where I'm not sitting here trying to sell anyone here on it. I'm sitting here talking about it because I am excited about it, and I have the wizard madness, right? And that's a nice feeling, right? Like it's nice to not be on the circuit, to be trying to market stuff, and to just be present as a person who is in community and is excited about making art.
Hell yeah. I think that's wonderful. It's been
Hmm.
really great. I've been seeing like I think that I think that a lot of the sorts of brains that are really excited about 7-part pact have been really excited about Sapphic World, and that's been really nice.
Hmm.
And seeing the same names.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think we both have that. I mean, like it's a thing that I think um like both games have very much in common, which is that they are deeply and intricately concerned with the ins and outs of producing this very particular fantasy, right? And they're very different fantasies, but Sapphic World is this kind of like it's a thing it's almost like um it reminds me of those old like almost like muds, I guess, or like Ultima Online, or like these like online spaces where people would go and free role play, and they had to be large enough and expansive enough to kind of accommodate everyone's weird little desires.
mhm.
And Sapphic World is kind of like that with like in kink with in a sense, right? Where it's a little, but also like just the sense of like like hidden away in every nook and cranny of this world are things that bring the world to life in very particular ways. It's very concerned with that, and I think Seven Part Bad is also very concerned with that. It's just concerned with it from a totally different angle, but it is something that like if you are someone who likes games that overwhelm you as part of the joy of playing them, I think that both games speak to you.
Yeah, I think I think this is also true about Zeb, um,
Hmm.
which is like the quality of a lot of games like as the facilitator or GM like really want you to uh or yeah facilitator I think is a good term for this like really want you to read through the entire book and understand everything that your players might encounter or you and the other players might encounter um and I think it's fun to have games that are like please do not read all of this. Like this will tell you where to go when you need to go there. I think it's good.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a thing where it's like a thing where part of the fun of all of these games is wandering through them. right, is like that like you sit down and you kind of get your little chunk of it and you're like, oh, this is cool. And then inevitably the rest of it will reveal itself to you, but it's good that it takes time.
Yeah, I think like I've definitely like I think early on when I was working on stuff, I did this, but I think especially through reading your work, like I've really oriented towards like secretism, um, and like putting secrets in my games that I don't think players will actually, or, like I don't think will be played. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's good.
I've had this idea for a zine in my head that I'm gonna make. I just have to like sit down and make it. But the idea of it is you play it's a solo game where you play as a princess in a tower, and the first like 8 or so pages are just like, here are the rules for waking up, here are the rules for wandering your tower, here are the rules for cleaning your tower, here are the rules for going to sleep. And then when you complete the rules for going to sleep, you go back to the start and you wake up. And that's the structure, right? That's the whole game as it's presented, is that there's this little mechanical loop and you just do it over and over. But that's not the whole zine, right? Most of the zine is how you get out of the tower and what's outside of the tower. You just never get to there from the part of the zine that is just the little loop, right? If you play the game as written, you'll never escape the tower. You only escape the tower if you break the rules of the game and go do something else. And I feel like like, a lot of what I've been doing when not doing Seven Part Pact has been me trying to take one little concept from Seven Part Pact and turn it into a game of its own. So, like, I did Go 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 recently, which is a little cyberpunk game that I'm returned to a zine that's like a model of like a decentralized hacker collective, and it's very like concerned with using children's games to like feed, like everyone's got their own little children's game that feeds into each other. And I'm very interested in like just taking one little component, like the idea of, what does it mean to find secrets in the game, turning that into the princess game. What does it mean for everyone to have their own game, turning that into Go Go Go. And that's been a really interesting kind of mental exercise. Is like, can I take all the crazy shit going on in Seven Part Pact and distill one thread of it into something really clear, and then put that in a zine?
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I've also kind of been in a similar space where I'm like, a lot of the smaller things that I wind up making are, well, actually, really a lot of the smaller things that I wind up making are both like taking out little mechanics and elaborating on them, and also like just doing different genres because I
Yeah.
have such a I have such an interest in genre
Hmm.
fiction, and like uh, you can only do so much with a even with a fantasy in a fantasy world with spaceships. You can't have a setting that doesn't
Hmm.
have swords and knights, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
I feel like for me, I'm so I guess not to say you're wrong. I struggle a lot with genre, but I think like I tend to get really fixated on sensation, or even like what is like I'm like I tend to get very concerned, like, okay, what's the tactile feeling of the object? And you do just hit a point, like I'm hitting the point in Seven Part Pact where it's like I encounter like I spent all weekend reading about medieval logistics and operations, and like how like the tyranny of the wagon. Like, how do you move an army 100 miles on foot? Like the nightmare that is involved in trying to make that happen is so interesting. And I'm like, oh well, does that belong in Seven Part Pact? And the answer is no, right? It doesn't. Wizards are not concerned with military logistics, and it's set in an archipelago, so I don't have to worry about any of that anyway. But like, now I want to make a game that's about overland logistics, right? Like, it does those things to you, right? It picks at your brain. And so I feel like that's sometimes when you've got like a huge project like Savage World, like Wizard game, like you start spinning stuff off just because you hit the limits of the space, right? You hit the spots where it's like, I can't go any further. There's nothing. If I go further, I'm making a different thing. So let me just make a different thing.
yeah, I very much agree. The phrase a phrase entered my brain because you mentioned that you were looking at medieval logistics and such on Twitter, and like I've been really thinking about sops recently, um,
Stop.
which is like a bread that's been like soaked in
Yes.
milk or wine, and
Yes. Yeah.
the phrase um all right, it's time for your food. Will you will you do the 1 block jump for the milk sop or do the 1 block vertical jump for the wine sop entered my brain, and
Yeah,
I just feel like people need to know.
in parkour civilization, no one ever does the 1 block vertical jump for the wine sop.
Yeah. Um,
Oh man.
discovering sops was a big part of writing part of Sapphic World, and they've kind of just stuck in my brain because I think it's a really funny name for a food.
No, it's really good. It's really it's kind of wimpy. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
It really evokes food that yeah, like looks up at you and is like, please don't eat me. I always come back to the ortolan when it comes to weird food shit. Ortolan bunting is my go-to weird food.
What's that?
Content warning for for everyone listening. Probably the next, I would say, like 30 seconds or so. I'm going to describe animal cruelty
Okay.
against birds. So apologies. Ortolan bunting is where you take a little. It's a French thing. You take a little bird, and you feed it very rich grains and wine until it's like plumped up, and then and like it effectively dies on the food, on like the wine. You drown it on the wine, and then you boil it in the wine, and then it's a little bird that's been like fried in like it's been fried and boiled, and like it's just like made out of like rich barley and stuff because of how you've been feeding it, and then you eat it, but you wear a napkin over your head, both to ensure that the rich smells go directly into your nose, but also to hide your face from God, so that no one can see you do this. God does not see you perform this atrocity. Um, that's that's fascinating to me. That's like one of those foods where it's like, ah, yes, this is a food that is like one of those like rich. This is like why rich people must die kind of foods. But it's
Yeah.
also just like metaphorically, like it's like it was made to be a metaphor in a poem. The fact that you hide your face from God while you eat it is really just the icing on the cake, you know?
Yeah, it's the fucking Lord of the Rings eating the big juicy tomato while the while the battle is going on thing. It's
I think
fucking
I think even more than that, it's the Skeksis, like the feast of the wriggling maggots. You know,
yeah, it's such an obvious metaphor.
because it's also like notably like it looks like a baby bird. It's not
Right.
disguised. It's not like a chicken nugget on your plate. It's like it's like you look at it. It's like, yeah, that's a whole ass baby bird. It's like looks like a peep, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know. I just need a guy to eat me out while he covers his head so that God cannot see what atrocities he performs. That's all I'm asking
That's
for.
fun. That's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
A little bird calling someone little bird. Jesus
yeah. My
Christ.
little orphan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to
or
talk to
mine.
Wendy about some things. Uh,
So.
yeah. Anyways.
Yes. Meanwhile, what else is on your mind?
I'd love to talk to you about games. I feel like,
Yes, I've heard about those.
yeah, you've given a rough sense of things you've been working on. Is there anything else you've been working on that you'd like to talk about?
So, I mean, Seven Part Pact, of course, oh, my forever baby. Go 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 has been an interesting little side venture. Honestly, the thing about Seven Part Pact is it's been like sorry, I got completely derailed by the chat. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it really feels nasty. Like the Dovecote dove is staring right at me as I described Ortolan bunting. But I really good
Loud
joke.
stone
Really good
creaking.
joke. Really funny. That was really good. Okay, so, um, Seven Part Pact. I think the thing about Seven Part Pact, and this happened with Eusebius too, is that with a sufficiently large game like that, it subsumes all other ideas into itself. It's a hungry, hungry beast, and it means that like the wizard monomania, I think is unflinching, right? Like it's one of those like, what am I working on? I'm working on wizards. What else am I working on? Well, I'm taking a break from wizards and doing X, Y, and Z. But it is, yeah, no, I'm Seven Part Pact is my everything. It's my baby. I've been it's like I'm just kind of endlessly revising and adjusting and tinkering and getting things perfect. I'm gonna go play it with some friends this weekend, and so I am kind of agonizing about how to make sure everything is perfect within it and printable. But yeah.
Hell yeah, I think that's good. I think sometimes it's good to lock in.
Yeah. I mean, it feels nice. It feels like such a relief from how I was when I was younger. When I was younger and in high school, I had like just 1,000 ideas, and it was so hard to kind of like see any of them to the finish line. And somewhere along the lines, I just kind of developed a like the endurance, I guess, to see projects through to the finish line, because it really does feel like an endurance game in a way that's not true about like a zine or a quick thing. It feels like a real like I have to pace myself. I'm a marathon runner. I'm coming in on the the 40th mile. I just have to like keep my rhythm. And it's an interesting feeling to have. It's an interesting relationship to have with a project, especially like to see it kind of become real and pull itself together. Especially Seven Part Pact, which I think is the first game where I started my initial version of it. I think was downright unplayable, right? Like the very first version of it I made was like miserable to play, and so it's just been a lot of evolution, not just of like figuring out kind of like like it's like finding the diamond in the rough. Really, is being like this thing is in a lot of ways a mess. How do I like conceptually? How do I hone it and narrow it in and sharpen it until it does what I want it to do, which is a lot harder than with Usabas, which was like fun from the get go, you know?
Yeah, I've been really interested to try the new stuff you've done with Seven Part Pact, because obviously
Yeah.
we did a show of it on here
Mm-hmm.
on my
Mm-hmm.
channel, and it was a
Which
very
was
different
really
game.
helpful. It was a very, I mean, it was a very helpful show because it helped me really clarify and figure out some important things with the game. But it's tricky, and it still has certain things I'm figuring out. But it has become a lot, I would say. Um, I've figured out how to kind of focus its energy a lot better. I think the biggest change from the version that we did on the show is changing the sorcerer into like taking away their primacy
Hmm.
and making the making like the wizard who is the king of the wizards and the wizard who controls the destinies of the wizards to be two separate wizards helped really clarify and align. I think kind of like helped give more space for messiness and politicking and dynamics.
I love that. I think that like it's really interesting to hear you say like there's still things that are tough, because I feel like I've had that experience where it's like sometimes it starts to feel like you're just like making something that shouldn't be made or not
Yeah,
that, but
yeah,
like that you're trying to uh that you're like filling in a shape that doesn't want to be filled in, but also
yes.
like it's really fun and really rewarding.
Well, I feel like it's like it feel like different. Sometimes you've got an idea and you start going with it, and immediately like everything's smooth and everything fits together, and just like all right, just got to do this, right? Like I nailed
Hmm.
it, I got that, and that like feels triumphant. It feels good. It's nice to know that I can make a thing that's good. But it does feel so much more, I think, like worthwhile and also like I don't know, like it's a personal demonstration of ability to take like a thing that is really hard and like a play experience that I am really fascinated by, that is really hard to teach a group of people how to pull off and to slowly inexorably figure out how to provide those tools for people, right? It's like figuring. I feel I'm really like what it's like teaching cats how to dance, right? Like it's the
Right.
like they don't want to do it, they don't want to work together, but like my God, right? You work at it, you learn them, you figure out how all the pieces click together, and then next thing you know, it's singing and humming, but it takes effort, right? And that feels good.
Yeah, and a lot of that is playtest. Like you've done and have facilitated and through your server like so many playtests, or not facilitated, but
Yeah,
uh over not I'm trying to find the
yeah,
word.
yeah.
You've
Yeah, coordinate's the word I'd use. Yeah,
coordinated, yeah, so many
yeah.
playtests in your server, and I
God,
feel like
yeah.
that's
I
very
mean,
helpful.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's also one of those things where it's like, I don't know, you have to play a game a lot, right? Like
Hmm.
you just have to go at it over and over and over again. And it's always so funny to me when I see people who are like anti-playtest or like, game, you don't need to playtest games. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, like you don't have to do anything in this world, but
Right.
like you can tell it makes a difference. It's meaningful, right? Um, it's like at the core of it, right? What is a game designer, right? And I come back to that a lot. And to me, right, like Bernie DeKoven says, okay, we got a group of people and they want to do something together, right? They want to be wizards together. And they can, if they work at it, figure out how to be wizards together in a way that feels fulfilling and fun and true to all of them. But that takes a lot of work and time and effort. People don't necessarily want to do that. And so the game designer is someone they trust enough to be like, the game designer to be like, hey, I already did a lot of work. Here's what I figured out works. Here you go. And then the group gets to be like, great, we have a social agreement. We don't have to spend all this time renegotiating. We can use this and then alter as we need. And so it's like, what's the function of the game designer? The game designer is someone who the players trust to have done the work, to have found that language, that community, those guidelines, that play. And so to me, there's a sense of like I without playtesting, I'm not fulfilling my end of that trust, right? Like they've got to trust in me that I when I give them something, it's good.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like there's a. I've been having a lot of conversations about this recently with like, especially friends who are designing games for the first or like, second time. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm finding that like there's a lot of concern, not even concern, like a lot of folks are encountering the person who is going to like antagonistically, intentionally play their game wrong for the first time.
Oh
And
yeah.
the thing that I say is like, okay, so this person has said, I've read the text and I'm choosing to do this wrong. Do you like do you think the
Yeah.
text is good and clear to a group that's not going to do that? Then you're fine. Then like
Yeah.
you've done your work. But I think like playtest is such an important part of getting to that point.
Yeah. It's to me, it's to make sure that like my game won't lead you astray, right? Like I think this actually there were moments even during the stream we did where I remember, and I don't remember the details, but I remember there being moments where like people would take actions doing like things that made sense every step of the
You
way. The
have a
game said,
heart
yes,
of
do this,
gold.
do this, do this.
Don't let them
And
take
where
it
it
from you.
ended up, where it landed, I was like, oh, I'm dissatisfied with that. I've seen that in other playtests too, where it's like someone does the right thing, quote unquote, like the thing the game says to do every step of the way. And then at the end of it, it's something that doesn't fit well. It's something that feels bad. It's something that doesn't feel empowering. It doesn't feel good. And I'm like, oh, that's what the playtesting is for, right? Is to catch those moments, right? Like, is to be like, you have played, like, you have followed the game with full faith and love in your heart, and the game has misled you. That's I don't want to do that to you, right? That's not what I'm trying to do. I want, even if the game is going to produce something that's unfun, which oftentimes I want it to do so, I want to make sure that you know that it's leading you to an unfun thing with eyes wide open, you know?
Yeah, it should be a little scary. Like or
Yeah.
like there there should be signs on the road to that. I very
Yes.
much agree.
Yeah.
Are there any games that you're looking at, reading, thinking about, playing recently that you'd like to talk about that are
What have I
not?
been looking at? What have I been looking at recently? I think, what did I talk about last time I was here? Do you remember at all?
Oh
I don't.
gosh, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm worried that my answer is the same.
That's okay.
I move glacially slowly sometimes. Last Train to Bremen is still very good.
Mhm.
It hasn't stopped being very good. Caro is still brilliant beyond belief. Um, what else has been really good that I've been enjoying? My friend Che has been making some really cool stuff. Che made, oh, what has Che been working on? Nothing public. This is the problem also, is all my favorite games are like things that, oh, you know what I've had a blast playing? I've had a blast playing
Yeah.
Arcs. The board game.
Arts.
That's been really fantastic. It's the board game by Leader Games. It's the it's by the people who did Root, and
Oh.
it's kind of like a Dune simulator, I guess. Like you are the regents of a dying empire out in the edge of the galaxy, and you're building up your little you're building up your little areas, but it's not like a smash your spaceships against each other kind of game. It's a lot more like political and maneuvering and fascinating than that. And it's got a lot of really cool and compelling components to it. And me and my girlfriend and my girlfriend's girlfriend have been doing an ARCS campaign where I am the last bastion of the dying empire, trying to hold it together. And my girlfriend's girlfriend is is a feudalist who is enforcing who's like trying to like bring about this kind of trying to instead of there being an empire, like these vassal lords. And then I think my girl, what the hell's Monica been up to in that game? Monica's got some fucking Shadow Wraith shit. There's just like it's just a
Yeah.
game like it's a game that is so brilliant because the designers have clearly sat with every single possible way you could engage with these little objects. And so you'll get these mechanics where it's like, there are like I don't know, there's just such brilliant little like, oh, if you put a spaceship in this location, it indicates this, or like they just understand the tactility of the objects they're working with so well. It feels like such a game, like a work made by a confident master, right? Like nothing feels out of place. It feels brilliant. It is very well done, and it's one of the most it feels so perfect. Like there's no element where there's nothing out of place. It's very brilliantly done.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully that gets. I don't really have people to play board games with these days who aren't online, so hopefully that gets
Yeah.
a tabletop sim or a game
I
version
think
like
there
Root
is a
did at some
tabletop
point.
sim of it. I believe there's a tabletop sim of it.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah, and I would recommend it if you get the chance to. It's a very interesting thing. It's tricky, right? It's a bit of a Euro game. There's a lot of little moving bits and bobs. There's a lot of shit that's like, all right, when you attack uh, an enemy fleet over a planet, you choose what size dice to roll. And those like you choose raid dice, raid dice, battle dice, or another thing. There's like an even worse thing you can do, and they have different weights and different things on them. And then if you blow up an enemy city, you provoke outrage that like can limit your access to the region. There's lots of like little fiddly bits and bobs, but it's really well done within that, and it's got me really thinking about 7 part packs more board game like qualities.
Hell yeah! That sounds sick. I'll definitely have to check that out.
Mhm.
Let me see. We're at about news time, I think.
Well, yeah,
So I think what we'll do is we'll do like two newses, then we'll take a little break, and then we'll finish up the rest.
sure, sounds good.
Awesome. I'm realizing that I forgot to open these in new tabs, so I'll be a second. Um, Here we go. And this one. Yeah, we got some stuff this week. Things have happened.
Things have happened. I've gathered that. I don't know. No one tells me when anything happens anymore. So
Events are
this is
unfolding.
the times that I'm a guest on here are the main way in which I find out things have happened.
I'm glad. That's how it should be. I
Yeah.
alone should bear this
I don't
burden.
get my news from the DevCote. I get my news from guesting on the DevCote.
Right. Like once a year.
Once a year, I get to
Love
find
that.
out. I get to emerge from my cave and find out what's going on.
Actually, I think once a year is. It's technically not once a year because the reason why you're on again is because we went over the 1 year period for the Dovecote.
Oh,
Like
sure.
September. It's like September 30th or something. Anyways, I'm gonna bring in Cordis the Newsbird, who's coming in from whatever fuck shit is going on with your the Shadow Wraith Empire in space. Shh.
So true.
Okay. Uh, this is true.
Grief, that is so true. I want you to know, by the way, that last time I was on ketamine, I had a wizard themed trip. I had like a 7-part pack themed trip that in which I realized that the room I was in was made out of cardboard and that I was a game piece and like an RPG character being puppeted by like some greater seventh dimensional player who was also playing other characters. Like it's kind of like a shared PC situation. So I'm like a parody of myself at this point. Like I'm just, I'm truly, I contain multitudes, and those multitudes, unfortunately, are mostly RPGs, mostly variations on wizards.
Someone either needs to get me high or badly sick so I can have a Sapphic World trip. I want to leave.
I feel like you'd enjoy ketamine. We can talk more about this later.
Okay, smiles.
This is a place where we're not being recorded.
Yeah. There's a cat named Ketamine. It's the first thing I always think of when I hear cat.
That's awesome. That's so
It's pretty
good.
cool. Yeah. All right. So the first topic is actually not a news topic. I wanted to talk about. I saw 2 threads on the Devil's website,
Yes.
which I'm still on, and I need to. I say that I need to get off, and then I don't. So it's like whatever.
Yeah, no, I'm stuck on the What Dies.
Stuck on the Devil's website. So this I can just read through this because it's pretty short. This is from Gnome and the Gnome. Mind control in D&D is a bummer. It removes player agency. Instead, I ask the player, you feel the urge to do XYZ. What are you experiencing to make you feel that way? The character loses agency, but not the player, and now it's a character development prompt. The player can decide if their character is feeling a magically amplified surge of real emotion, maybe something long buried, a hallucination, a delusion, or merely confusion. They can pick what makes sense for their character and keeps them comfortable at the table. And then there was also this from Brent Jans from Dork Lord Canada, who said, okay, TTRP Twitter, let's huddle up for a quick toolbox talk. Character equals the imaginary person a player creates and plays. Player equals the real-life human acting out fantasies by way of a character. These are not interchangeable terms, so I need you to stop making videos about how do I keep my players from dying during my games, or how do I handle players attacking other players, because if you don't mean characters, the first sounds like you have serious OSHA compliance issues, and the second is assault and outside the GM's purview. And yes, this is mostly tongue-in-cheek. Yeah, it's good. It's mostly tongue-in-cheek. I don't really care which one you use where, unless I'm editing your game, and then I and the reader care very much. So, I was just kind of like, I don't know, both of these in quick succession really had me thinking about, like, this side of design.
I feel like the thing is, right, like, and this thing I've been thinking about a lot, is that when you are in a more traditional game, which is to say a game in which your central axis of agency emerges through your character, right? Like you are a player in D&D and you've got your character, things that take away your control of your character feel really horrible, right? Like disproportionately horrible, because it's effectively the equivalent of like you're playing tag and then you get hit with a debuff that makes your hands fall off. Like it's just like, okay, well now what are you doing? Right? Like the only mechanism by which you had to engage with the game you were playing is gone. You can't do the one thing the game lets you do. And so I think that like when a game has more of a writer's room quality, right? Like when you're playing I don't know, like if we're playing, I'd say like completely flip it around, like we're playing like a troop game, right, where everyone has like 6 or 7 characters or whatever, having one of them get mind controlled, I think it still doesn't feel good. It feels invasive and a little weird. Like it feels like someone getting in your stuff, but it feels a lot less bad, I would say, than when someone kind of takes your own character. But even then, though, like I don't know, like I'm someone who really doesn't enjoy it. And extend that beyond like mind control magic and to like charisma checks, right? Or like seduce or manipulate in Apocalypse World. One of my few complaints with that game is that seduce or manipulate works differently on PCs than on NPCs. And with PCs they get a choice, and with NPCs they don't, which means it is a mind control move against NPCs. And when I'm emceeing, it really makes me uncomfortable because it is. I feel like there is, for me, it's important for me to be faithful to the reality of the space of the fictional thing, right? I am not just here to tell a story about you getting into the room. Like, if you're trying to like get past a guard, and I'm not here to be like, oh, we're telling a story about getting into that room. I'm here to be like, no, the room and the guard I am modeling as these real things, and I want you to engage with them, and I don't want you to be able to just mind control the guard. I don't want you to be able to just kind of like strip that away. Or if you do, I want it to feel invasive and weird. And so like mind control mind control feels weird. Mind control feels invasive, and that can be something that game designers do on purpose, right? Like, if I like I when I put mind control spells in games, when I put like mind control spells in Seven Part Pact, I'm thinking about how do I make this feel weird. But I am at every turn also thinking about like, well, who gets agency here? Excuse me, who does the game assume acts? Who does the game assume doesn't act? That that is all really important to me.
Yeah, I feel very similar. Like a big thing, I think after potential, very likely even after having heard you talk about this particular issue, um, a lot of the way that like Sapphic World moves work at the moment is that there are no like and they do as you ask type things.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
all kind of through the lens of like the like asking someone to do something move. The results are on a 10 plus they understand what you're asking for and know what you really need. On a 7 to 9 they understand what you're asking for. On a 6 or lower they don't understand what you're asking for, or they do understand the request is frustrating. Like I
Good.
think
I like that. That's really compelling.
yeah, I think coming at it from an angle of consequence is like valuable.
Hmm.
What's the other one? Oh yeah, the fucking there's a debate move in Sapphic World where it's like
Hmm.
uh it's not that you're right, it's that there will be negative social consequences if they then argue in bad faith if you roll well. um
Yeah, I always love in Apocalypse World the go aggro move where it's like when you threaten someone with violence to get what you want, they have the choice of either doing what you want or taking the violence, right? It's a
mhm.
very clear cut, right? Like, yeah, those are the options, right? Like, it's not that they do what you want, it's that there's a carrot and there's a stick. Or I mean I really love, I always come back to in Under Hollow Hills the fucking horse move. Have I talked to you about the
Yes, the
horse
horse
move?
move's great.
I love the horse move. Fucking love taking your breath away. I love that. It's so horny. It's so
Yeah,
brilliant.
it's great.
Yeah, and it to me is also that, right? It's not saying I seduce you. It's saying I am vulnerable in this moment, and I am seductive, right? But it's showing it's seductive. It's not saying it.
Yeah, I very much agree. I think like there's so much more space for it, right?
Yeah,
Um, one
yeah.
thing that I said, I'm just gonna read off of my. Sorry to just be reading stuff that I've already written for this
Awesome,
entire story, but
awesome.
I wanted to read off of my thread that I responded to like the no man thing with,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that this this is kind of my take on like trad game mind control, which is I said I
Mm-hmm.
think D&D fails in this regard no matter what because its material consequences are absolute. What Anne describes here is good, that being like the like you feel the urge to do XYZ and then what are you experiencing?
Yeah,
But it's a
yeah.
means of coping with a game that doesn't let players set up safe boundaries or being involved in what decides their characters. I think if um, I think if you want that sort of like perhaps you don't actually perhaps you want that discomfort, right? But like if you don't want that discomfort, if that's not something you want at your table, like I think you do a benefit to yourself and the people you're playing with by not playing a game that that like uses that discomfort carelessly. Um,
Yeah.
and I think like a lot of safety tools that try and mitigate that while still maintaining the uh like I guess like quote unquote mechanical sanctity of the game are kind of missing the ball a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like there is something about, and I feel like it connects to the thing of like characters versus players, right?
Mhm.
Because in a certain way, there starts to be a little bit of bleed there, right?
Mhm.
When your only avenue for engaging with the world is taken away from you, then and is made to do something else, that feels a lot more body snatchery as a player than it does feel body snatchery as a character. And the thing is, right, that's not bad. There's a lot of styles of RPGs in which that's a great thing. It's just like you gotta know that that's what you're doing. You gotta do that. You should be doing that on purpose. You can't be like it's reckless to I think create that sensation without like setting with what is that gonna mean, right? What does that actually involve, right? Like, but
Mhm.
like when done well, it can be done really well. You have to be thinking about it.
Yeah. One, I can't take credit for this. That there's a thing in Sapphic World that I did not write that was written by Lotus Virus, who's a guest writer, um, which is the like dimension of Hesed, where there is a thing that the GM can prompt any character to do at any time, where it's just like, uh, hey, the Hesed or a person Hesed is prompting your character to act in the way that they would most like to act.
Mhm.
Like, and you, like, you have to do this, but like you as the player are going to make your character act in a way that is, you know, fitting your character. And I think like I think playing with the difference between player and character and treating characters primarily as potentially on the one hand avenues for like potential bleed, but also on the other hand as like fundamentally um, objects, but not necessarily inert objects, right?
Yeah.
Um, is a good way to kind of bake safety into these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it to me oftentimes comes down to like what do players, what does for each player, what do they have unquestioned authority on? What do they have like right of first refusal on? And then what do they have like say over? And for in Dungeons and Dragons, for instance, let's just because I always it is the most archetypical,
yeah,
it's the game that we all have to like talk about all the time. In Dungeons and Dragons your character is the interiority of your character is the only thing you have unquestioned say on, right? No other player has the right to infringe upon your own interiority. Uh, your actions you have right of first refusal on, right? You get to say you do, like if you don't say you're doing anything, someone can be like, oh well, maybe are you doing this instead, right? Like people can kind of like, but you get to kind of like make that first claim, and then like your like what happens to you is not something you have a lot of control over, and you certainly have no control over what's happening beyond you, right? Whereas in other games, that's not true, right? There are
hmm
plenty of RPGs where you have a lot more control over all that, over that world around you. It's just, and so it's different in all those spaces, and it's a question of like if you've got something that is unquestionably yours, and I take that away from you, that's weird and bad, right? But if we go into it knowing, hey, the interiority of your mind is not unquestionably yours, right? You can have right of first refusal over it, but people will insert things into your mind that are beyond your control. Hey, then right, we're cooking. We're good.
yeah. That's like I think Mothership does this really well, where it's like
Mhm.
your character is going to do things uh, that are dictated by the dice in a lot of ways, in a lot of cases. And I think the fact that it's like kind of upfront about that makes it interesting and fun and
Yeah.
yeah. Like I think an important element of this is these aren't hard lines. Like we're not. It's important
No.
not to say like games can't do X, Y, or Z, but I think it is valuable to say like if a game is going to do X, Y, or Z, it should do so consistently and safely.
The
Um,
thing I always say, right, is that there's no. It's important to understand whenever you do literally anything in games, and this is true from choosing to do a game that has no cover or like has no
mhm.
layout, or like choosing to do a game that has like mind control or a game that has like like intense like if you make a game that has sexual violence component or like it's a wizard game where like patriarchy is a critical thing, right? There's no rule saying you can't do anything. You just need to understand why that norm exists and also
Mhm.
what it's doing, right? Why do games generally have a taboo against sexual violence? Why do games generally have a encourage, like, why is it important to be safe with mind control? Why is it, why, and then you can set into like, why do games have cover art, right? Why is that important? What is that cover art doing? And if you choose to go against it, Godspeed, right? Fuck yeah, make something new, make something that challenges preconceptions. But you got to know why that thing was there in the first place, so you can effectively scaffold around it, right? Like for the sexual violence taboo, I think is a really easy one because the reasons why it's taboo are very clear, right? If
Right.
you're playing in a low trust environment, or even fuck in most high trust environments, it is a wildly dangerous and risky thing to introduce in a game. And so if you are going to have a game that has it, you have to build a tremendous amount of safety and trust and scaffolding into that whole play experience for people to cultivate with each other to ensure that you are doing the same work that that taboo was doing previously. And so on and so forth with everything, all the way down to, why should your game have cover art? If you don't have cover art, what was that cover art going to do for you? What do you need to do instead?
Yeah, I very much agree. Um, I want to hang on. I want to correct something. So I said something earlier that was not true about Hesed because I just want to be correct about this
Yeah.
other person's writing. So it's actually not that the GM decides when this happens. The player does. The player says,
Oh.
"Hey, someone is leaving my mind. I have this urge. My character has this urge. I want them to act on it." And then the GM says, "Yes, that's true," or "No, that's not true." Which is very fun. The person who wrote this move is a genius. The Lotus Virus is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, games.
Games.
Cool.
Cool.
Let me see. Yeah, let's do that second story. We'll talk about Morkborg video game. Smiles,
Yeah.
frowns, tilts head, confused. And then we'll take a break.
Friends.
Yeah. So Morkborg's getting a damn video game. Let me remind myself of some of the details here. So obviously, like, it has this like Morkborg aesthetic. It's made by a company that has made one other paid game called the Texture Cyst, and otherwise has a history in free Newgrounds games.
Huh.
And it's very interesting. I'm very curious, like, what the ins and outs of this deal are. I'm gonna assume it's like probably it is often just someone knows someone. Like that tends to be how it is.
Overwhelmingly, yes. That is what I would guess as well. And like I feel like, hey, free Newgrounds games, the perfect space for Morkborg, right? Like Morkborg is to me like it's so much in that Newgrounds environment. I my reaction is just like get that back, right? Like make that cool thing, make that money. I don't know if it's gonna be like a big hit or something, or if this is just like a cool project that's happening. But whatever the scale of it is, I think it's like I'm just like, oh, neat. I don't know. I'm not a huge video game person, also though, so I'm just kind of like, cool.
As a big video game person, I'm also like completely uncynical about this. I think this is like good. Like, the reason why I looked into the people who made it, it was because I was like, oh, is this like connected to Tencent or some shit? But no, it's like just some like fucking indie people. It's good.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's the ideal, right? Like that's optimal.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw Texture Assist does seem cool. A bullet hell typing game.
I think I've heard of that one. That's
Yeah.
sick.
Let me see if there's anything that I missed. I don't think so. But yeah, pretty neat. Q4 2020. Oh, I guess it's also on Kickstarter.
Oh,
Q4 2025. I'll put the Kickstarter up. Seems neat. If you like gaming of both, then give that a look. All right. I think that's that for that news. We're gonna take a break, and then I am going to talk about our last story, and you'll yeah. See y'all in a bit. Be right back. Hang on, wait. Hello, everybody. We're back.
Hello.
Um, I've talked about this on the stream, but I've not talked about it on the Dovecote, which is that we have a resolution on the Big Bad Con stuff. Do I still have the my opinion text? My opinion. Can I get like an arrow or something?
Yeah. Yeah. This is not affiliated with J Dragon or Possible Games.
Not affiliated with J Dragon.
J Dragon has.
You don't want to harass J Dragon. Okay, I'm putting on my this is my opinion badge. I'm just gonna make that big. So, I'll just show this, which is basically. In fact, I might even just read the text that I wrote down because I think it summarizes it pretty well. So last check-in was like Big Bad Con had fully screwed the pooch on everything. Specifically, the second demand about like removing the censorship to the Actually, I should go way back because some people have probably never heard of this. So Big Bad Con is a convention. There was a panel that some folks were running, which was like Jews and TTRPGs, and they wanted to include a section in the bottom that was like kind of an anti-Zionist statement from the river to the sea type beat. And Big Bad Con censored it, and there was a bunch of correspondence, and eventually, Esther and Hamna called for a boycott, and a bunch of people signed that boycott, including a bunch of event runners. And so Big Bad Con throughout the entire month of September was working on this, consulting with people, consulting with like professors and stuff. Very, very like thin correspondence with the actual boycott and I would say the broader public. And eventually we're like, hey, here is our response. We're going to honor. So the demands of the boycott were one, to make a statement in support of Palestine and Palestinians. Two was to remove the censorship, and three was to kind of work towards the future, work in the future towards better care for POC and anti-Zionist Jews and broadly the Palestinian and anti-Zionist cause. And they were like, we can't do the second one. We can't remove the censorship. We're worried about having that sort of language on our website. And that was, I think, like a Friday. And then by the Monday, they had basically flipped on it. And so, actually, let me make sure I have my dates in proper order. No, sorry, it was like, I think it was like a week. There was a week of waiting for this. But yeah, 9/27, September 27th, they put out a statement saying like, hey, we're gonna honor all the demands. They put out a big statement in support of Palestinians, which you can read yourself. It's pretty long, but I personally think it's pretty good. There was some additional like criticism from the boycott folks that you can find if you go to Esther or Hamna's Twitters. But broadly, pretty good. Yeah, my general thoughts on this. Good to see Big Bad Con at least do the bare minimum. It is still frustrating to see them refuse to make a statement against harassing boycott organizers because, my understanding is Esther and Hamna have received a bunch of death threats, and like, that's fucked. Third is kind of in progress because I know that there's been some correspondence around this, but it does suck to see the same bad actors who had to be muted and temp banned filter back into the Discord now that the heavy air quotes drama is over. And I also just broadly think that a lot of important folks, including special guests, many of them being BIPOC, have chosen not to run their events due to the way they've been treated or seen other people be treated. And I think that is unfortunate and disquieting. And I hope that in future years the convention is able to regain that trust, uh, not through words but through actions. And I think that there need to be some, in my opinion, I think there need to be some leadership changes. But yeah, just broadly, I'm glad that this happened. I'm glad that I at least feel comfortable going to Big Bad Con, but I realize that's kind of a privileged position. But nonetheless, I am glad that this worked out this way, and that I don't have to worry about this anymore. Well, not really. I'm glad that I don't have to worry about them not honoring the demands anymore. I am pissed off that I have to worry about my peers and colleagues feeling worried about going to this convention.
Yeah, I feel
because it's
yeah.
fucked up.
Yep.
But yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah.
That's that's that. So
Yeah.
we gotta read our email. Actually, I'll leave. Do you have any thoughts? Just in case.
Oh no.
Okay.
I
Awesome.
mean, I do have thoughts. I do have
But you will not say
opinions.
them.
I will not say them.
Awesome.
Not in. I have yes.
Understandable.
I am very glad that things have reached an agreement and that Big Bad Con has made the choice that is best for all the attendees and all the folks. I fully support the final decision that they made, and I'm really glad that things are able to resolve well. I have a lot of respect for everyone involved, especially the organizers who have had to deal with a lot. There you go.
Awesome. I think that's a perfect response. It's great. Hell yeah. We're gonna read our email. Please send emails to darlingdemoneclipse@gmail.com. I will answer them.
Emails are so delightful.
I love having an email. I love having. Oh yeah, I don't know if I've said this before on the show.
Joke last time, but I love that it's an email.
Yeah, it's. I haven't watched Homestar Runner, but it's Homestar Runner-esque.
Yes, I also am too young for Homestar Runner. We're just a couple Zoomers.
Yeah. But yeah. Also, I guess technically, if you want to, you can use the contact in eclipse.gay. That does also lead to my email.
That's very delightful.
Okay, we're gonna bring in Apocrypha, the Mailbird, who I feel like is female, but that can be talked about.
I'll gender the birds.
We'll gender the birds.
I'll gender your fucking birds.
Gender my birds. Oh. Okay. This is a good one. Thank you, Audiovore. Actually, okay, yeah, you did sign at that. Yeah. We all love opportunities to act wizardly and experience wizardry. Do either of you have recommendations for other wizard-type experiences? Can be TTRPGs, video games, movies, books, anything wizardly. Perhaps things that have inspired either of your works.
The Wizard's Grimoire series by Vincent Baker, to me, is very peak wizardry. It is a very fantastic 3-player game where one of you is a wizard, and then the other 2 people are 2 friends of that. So if I'm playing Wizard's Grimoire, I have my wizard and I have my grimoire, and I'm gonna grab you, and I'm gonna grab another friend of ours, and I'm gonna drag the 3 of us over, and you 2 are gonna GM for me, and you don't have to know anything about the world. You don't have to know anything about what I've done beforehand. You're just gonna GM for me for however long we feel like going, and then you're done. And then later on, I'll grab 2 other people to GM for me. So it's a game that's it's like flipped Zebes. You see what's going on, right? Where it's like the cohesive thing is the one character, but the GMs are constantly rotating out. And it's a very fascinating game where you really get to feel like a wizard and you get to do some real bullshit magic. It's really neat. I really adore it. There's a lot of really good wizard stuff out there. There's a tremendous number of them, far more than I've even engaged with. Every single time I think about wizards, I have friends who hype up this or that video game. But I've heard really good things about Book of Hours, I think is the one. Is that the one made by the Cultist Simulator people?
Probably.
But Book of Hours, I've heard really good things about that as a wizard video game. And then there's like the OG wizard tabletop RPGs like Ars Magica, Sorcerer. There's a thing that happens to game designers where they want to make a wizard game, and they always want to make a really ambitious wizard game with a lot of weird moving parts. It's inevitable. It's just part of making making a wizard, like being a game designer, is that eventually you get hit with wizard mania, and you need to make a wizard game, and it happens to a lot of folks.
that tracks. It's really funny that it happened to Polly immediately.
Yes, literally, Polly went through Wizard Mania right off the gate and has cleared the gap.
I deeply enjoy any time that you bring up Wizard game. I think it's a really endearing part of your repertoire of things that you bring up on shows.
You are a wizard, Polly's Wizard game.
Yeah,
Yes, fucking phenomenal. Genuinely one of my favorite RPGs.
it's great.
Absolutely brilliant. I stand by that one. I recommended reading for everyone.
We played that on this marathon. It's awesome.
Awesome, I love that, and it's so good.
Great game. Okay, my Wizard Media. I've set up a display for this. So, the video game Noida, right? So like
Yeah, Noida's one that I've heard a lot of people talk about.
this column is all of this bit here. This is all of Noida that you have to play to beat the game.
Oh my god.
What's all this then? What's all this? What's up here?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Like, in terms of like inspiration, I think just being like inscrutable and like bigger than it needs to be in a lot of ways. Like,
Critical qualities of a good wizard game or a good wizard media to me. Esoteric. It must have a second or multiple layers of meaning underneath its initial layer of meaning, which require contemplation to access. You can see that with Earthsea books and Ursula Le Guin's fascination with Taoism. You can see that with Noida, and like, I don't know, like I think for fact, the Gnosticism, it shows up. Good wizard stuff must be larger than it needs to be. It must be sprawling and labyrinthine, and I think thirdly, it's got to have some like good proper, like you can't. I'm a hater of like when magic feels truly systemic. Magic has to just be like there always has to be one little thing. Like there has to be a mystery beyond the magic, and that I think is a critical third component of what makes a good wizard game really sing. Is that you are incredibly powerful, and there is something beyond it that you don't quite understand.
yeah, I think that's a really good. Those are good rules for wizardry. I guess that is a way that a lot of video games I think fail magic.
Yes.
And frankly, a lot of
That's
tabletop
difficult,
games and a lot of
right? That's like
fiction.
it's such a difficult challenge because the problem is that like a video game is permissive. It has to list out all the things you can do for you to be able to do them. And that's like the opposite of a tabletop RPG, where a tabletop RPG you start out being able to do anything, and the game designer stops you and says, "Well, if you want to do that, you have to do this first." And so like video games are really disadvantaged when it comes to magic because they have to make a list of all the things you can do with it, and then be like, "This is what like I give you permission to do all these things," and that's tough. That's a
Yeah,
toughie.
it's got to be math rather than art.
Yeah, and like the trick, right? The trick to a computer game that can do good wizard shit is to really like make it emergent, right? To be like,
Mhm.
okay, here's a set of little principles, and then like I do think that like to some degree Minecraft really lets you get into wizard shit, right? On a certain level, where it's like you've got some pretty clear core principles, and then you can build fucking anything with it, right? If you pull enough bullshit, and that to me lets it be very wizardy, right? Even though at no point do they like much more than the actual like alchemical crafting parts of it are. I think that, and I think Caves of Cud has wizardy qualities.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think like Cud really does land on that emergent front where it's like, I've had, God, I've had some recent Cud runs where it's just like, I don't understand what's happening on the screen. Like, there are reflections of my guy showing up and trying to kill me with blasts and like making space-time vortexes that are sucking them up, and then I go into one of them, and then I'm in like a completely different place that I don't recognize with them, and there's an extra dimensional invader who's coming to kill me, and they have blasts. Like, it's if you're gonna like trying to do magic with like a system, that system has to be like, as you said, like emergent and like somewhat chaotic. I think that's where the fun is there for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of any other wizard medias. Part of this is we don't have any other questions, so I'm trying to stall a bit.
A little bit.
Um,
Which, hey, feel free to send questions or yeah. I'm so good at answering questions. I'm so good at answering questions. I'll answer any question. I'll tell you about the ketamine. I'll tell you about ketamine if you
yeah,
Am I allowed? I feel like that'll get me in more trouble with than talking about the big bad boycott.
it's probably
Um
fine. Folks are also welcome to ask questions in chat. I prefer the email, but
yeah.
if you you don't know what to ask anymore, that's super valid. You've asked so many questions. You've asked enough questions for a couple lifetimes, goblins. You can rest.
You've done the hard work. You've put your time in. There's actually a toll. Um I think what's a good was I have so many. I have a lot of books on my shelf. I've categorized the books on my shelf into two categories, which are fake wizard tales and real wizard spell books.
Oh,
And fake wizard tales are stuff like Earthsea or Name of the Wind or Wolf and White Van, which to me are all stories about wizards.
mm,
And then real wizard spell books are Entangled Lives by Merlin Sheldrake. Sorry, yeah, Merlin Sheldrake or oh god, what else? Oh, The Red Book by Carl Jung. And then what else do I got over there? The Arcades Project by Walter Benjamin, which while none of them explicitly say I'm a spell book, they are all wizard spell books to me, and just written about real things instead. And that to me is a very important category difference. Is this a story about a fake wizard or is this a real wizard spell book? And it just doesn't reveal it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
If I was to go to witness protection, actually, if the opposite that someone has told me it would be is Q Knight.
Q
Q being
Knight.
the J, and then Q is the on the opposite side of the like if the
Mm,
counted down the alphabet instead counted up from Z, you get to Q, and then Knight, of course, or I will also say like Q St. George, right? Like St. George to me is a really good like as a hyphenated last name is a really good um wizard. Sorry, opposite self surname.
yeah. I've been playing a lot of Space Station 14, um, which is a video game. It's like if Among Us was a LARP, but also it wasn't a LARP. It was a video game. like it's like if Among Us was Habbo Hotel. Uh,
I love that.
yeah, and you like run around and like do normal shift stuff while people are trying to sabotage the station. Um, but my point being, I have a character in there who's a gray alien called Sunky Bebo, and my friend
That's so
Eden.
good.
Oh, sorry. What was
Oh,
that?
we got a question. I just said that's so good. Just Sunky Bebo is such a good alien name.
Yeah, I'll hit the
We
questions in a
got a question
second.
from actual factual. I put it in the chat. But yes,
Hell
carry
yeah.
on.
Uh, so like, I'm talking about Sunky Bebo one day, and my friend Eden, who is a loves spoonerisms, loves wordplay, is constantly doing spoonerisms, is constantly doing puns. Um,
Hmm.
says, what was it? Moonlock Wasp Arrow, and I'm like, what do you mean by
Whoa.
that? Where does that come from? And they were like sun key b bow moon lock wasp arrow and then we just started riffing for like an hour about different
I have a
variations on
friend.
that.
I have a friend who's a very brilliant lady, who was very good at speaking English language, which is I cannot speak English language, but are you familiar with it at all?
I don't know if I am.
Let me do you see in what it's English language. Uh, can you tell what is an example? Can you tell what's going on with it? Or would you like for me to read you a little bit, maybe a little story in English language? Yeah, here we go. I've got a story for you. I've got a quick little
Okay.
story. I'm not gonna read all of it even, but it is you are probably familiar with it. It's the story of a Little Rat Rotten Hut.
Hmm.
Uh, Once upon term, der worsted ladle go ho lift wetter murder inner ladle cordage honor itch offer lodge dock florist. Disc ladle gull orphan worry putty ladle rat cluck wetter ladle rat hut and fur disc raisin, pimple colder, ladle rat, rotten hut. Pim- Pimple colder, ladle rat, rotten hut. Uh, One morning, ladle rat, rotten hut's murder, colder in set. Ladle rat, rotten hut. Never see ladle baskin winsome bird and barter and shulkin cockles. Dick disc ladle baskin torter, cordage or offer groin murder. Ho lifts honor utter sight offer florist. Shaker lake. Dunstopper laundry route, Dunstopper peck floors, Dun daily daughter inner florist, and yonder.
All right, so we're gonna rate no, we're still going. We're still going.
No,
That's scary.
I'll stop. But do you understand what's going on, right? Isn't that fun?
I don't know if I do. Is it you change every syllable to what it? Is it you change every syllable to something else that it is? Like
no, it's you take the story, and you replace it with near similarly pronounced words.
Okay, that makes sense.
So little becomes ladle, red becomes rat,
Right.
Robin Hood becomes rotten hut, right? So you kind of change every single word slightly.
That's really scary.
To make it sound, and so to read it right, it becomes it sounds like gibberish, but then these moments of clarity come through.
All right, so we're gonna need to gaslight my friend Eden into thinking I deleted my Twitch channel, because I don't think anything will be okay ever again if she gets access to this knowledge.
If she learns about English language, yeah, you gotta keep this secret under all circumstances.
Gotta keep it a secret from her. Okay, let's actually read questions. I got deep in the sauce.
I just started enchanting at you.
So this question is from Actual Factual. You mentioned overlap of board games and TTRPGs earlier. I'm curious to hear more about like where the boundaries between those two concepts lay, and what things you're excited to pull from board games into RPGs.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not as much of a board game person as other people are. I just feel like, board games are they're really good at building little perfect machines. And RPGs are great because they're never perfect little machines. Like, RPGs never successfully... Like, board games are like, okay, we're going to abstract basically everything in order to tell a little story about one specific mechanism here. And then RPGs are always like, oh, but you can kind of do anything with it. And so there's something really fun for me about being like, okay, we're theoretically playing a board game right now, but that board game is vulnerable and warped by our actions, right? Like, a big difference there is that, like, in a tabletop RPG, the fictional world has this degree of supremacy over the board game world, where in the board game world, it doesn't, right? The idea of being like, oh, I can do this because in the fictional world, it's allowed, right? Like, you couldn't get away with that in a board game. And so it's interesting how they feed into each other. They open up this possibility for them feeding into each other, where they're both really kind of concerned with, like, abstraction and representation and articulation and simulation and narrative and all this stuff. But at the core of it, there's this tension between how much say does the world we are imagining get to have. And I'm not finished with those thoughts. I'm not even starting with those thoughts. So, actual factual, I'm sorry I don't have, like, a clearer thing there. I just know there's something really important there that I'm fascinated by, which is, like, how does the system and the dream feed into each other? Or as a friend of mine puts it, games have clouds and they have dice, and how do the clouds and the dice talk to each other is something that feels very important to me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've been thinking a lot about that with the Sapphic World rituals that I've been writing, which like all contain a physical element or some sort of like, it's usually either like a physical artifact or a narrative, sort of a narrative warping almost. And I've also with like Sapphic World's campaigns, I've thought a lot about this. Like, I think there's just a lot of unexplored and underexplored space of like playing a character through an interface that's not just saying what they do or rolling dice or looking at cards. Like, I think there's a lot to be said about like or you know, like moving them on a board and then saying they're in this position. I think there's a lot that can happen in spaces that are like pressing a button or pretending to make an input on a joystick. Like, there's a lot of weird shit you can do.
Well, there's a very tactile thing to the whole process, right? Like for me, as someone who's obsessed with tactility in games, there's something really important about like the way that board games are physical objects that you are engaging with. And to me, a tabletop game is also very much that. Like the book is the physical object. And so as I expand away from, oh, well, just the book, right? What else is a physical object here? I feel like it opens up a lot of really interesting space for me.
Yeah. Um, Next question from Mossy Kid. Hey Jay, if you could throw a coup against the Coastal Wizards, what mandate would you lay down about their magic cards?
Um, I think if I could seize control over Magic the Gathering, the number one thing that I would set to work on, which is like fundamentally an anti-capitalist desire, right? Like this
Mhm.
thing that I want is not something that could exist in Magic in its current form and is like antithetical to Magic in its current form, Magic the Gathering, but I would seek out I would construct some kind of centralized standard by which other groups of people could be appointed to themselves create magic cards and turn the act of playing magic cards into much more of like like be like I would get really invested in what does it mean for Magic the Gathering to exist beyond WotC in hundreds of years into the future. Like what does it mean for Magic the Gathering to be a board game like chess? What does it mean for it to exist indefinitely into the future? What does it mean for it to become a folk art? And so I would work to transition from being a vehicle of making money into a vehicle of culture and expression. This is, of course, this of course will never happen, not in like 1,000 years, but it's what I would do if I could seize command of Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of value to be like there's a lot to be said about like a thing taking an engine that keeps making things and turning it into an engine that preserves the things that it's made. um,
Mhm.
yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
I
well, I mean, I'm always very concerned with like, what is this thing? What's the legacy of this thing? It's why like a lot of my games I think are very focused on decentralizing the creator because at a certain level I want it to kind of exist beyond me. And I'm very much like, what does it mean for people to keep playing with this even decades or centuries after me? And I think it would be good. Like Magic right now is inseparable from the people who sell it. Like Magic is Wizards of the Coast. What would it mean to decouple Magic from Wizards of the Coast? How can you do that while still preserving the things that Wizards of the Coast is really good at maintaining, which is like a centralized rules, a comprehensive rules document that is like infallible. How do you go from there? So that's my fantasy.
yeah, that's really neat. Um, we have questions from in my email. All right, I'm gonna be processing this as I read it. So, uh,
Mm-hmm.
this is from Phoenix. I've gotten back into making a TTRPG, and I'm in a place where I feel like I could playtest with a group to get a sense of what I want out of it. I have a simple setting and a clear picture of what feelings and experiences I want to evoke with the game. This is also the first time I've playtested a ground up system, and I'm looking for a bit of advice on playtesting. Also deciding a dice system. There are so many dice systems.
Oh God. So it's your first playtest. I think that the most important things are um you want the thing you want to be doing right now in this first playtest is making sure that the core of it is fun, right? You're just trying to make sure there is something fun in the thing that you are doing with your friends because you need that reinforcement and that acknowledgement that at the core of what you are making is like a fun thing. So I think your priority here is really just like get your friends together, jam it out, see how it feels. If it feels good, you're golden, right? That's what you need. Um, I think there's a lot of stuff I've talked about playtesting. I've written articles on it. I think that with dice systems, I mean, my games don't really have dice, so I think, but like the thing you want with a dice system, especially when you're at the first stage of playtesting, is just pick a dice system that is familiar to you and use it almost as a shorthand. Because, like, effectively, when you think about what is happening with playtesting, right? If you were there earlier when I was talking about Bernie DeKoven and the idea of, like, the game designer is providing a pre-mediated set of rules for a group of people who don't want to have to figure it out themselves. Playtesting is the part where you figure it out so that you can give it to other
Yeah.
people, which means, like, at the start, at the start of playtesting, the first time you run the game, only you can run it. You have to be there, and you are running a bespoke little thing for a group of people. So it doesn't matter what dice system, because you're just trying to make sure it is something that keeps the sense of play going, whatever you're comfortable with. And then, or unless you're like, oh, I have an idea for a dice system that like feels good in action. That's different. Right? If you've got an idea for a dice system, go with that. But if you're not sure, just do whatever. Because the important part is getting that sense of play, and then once you know that sense of play is good, it feels good to do the thing you're all getting there to do. Then add more stuff, add more bits, right? Like nail more things down, and slowly focus on what does it take to remove you from the room, right? What does it take to not require you to be the GM, not require you to be one of the players, not require you to be present. Focus on removing yourself slowly over time, and replacing yourself with the game itself. And that I think that approach is going to get you pretty far.
Yeah. A thought that I think is like kind of parallel, but maybe adjacent, is like, I think, I think as you go through future playtests, I think like thinking about, and maybe even like future games, thinking about, uh, maybe this is just very telling about the way that I make games personally, but like thinking about what the challenge or like what the resolution system says about the game, I think can be a useful early step, but also it's not that important for like early days into the first playtest. And if you're asking that question now, I think it's not that important.
Yeah, if it's not something that you have strong feelings about, then clearly it is not an important part of the central bit of your design. It is a thing which I encourage you to ultimately have strong feelings about, in the same way that, like, I think it's very good to have strong feelings in kind of every part of your game's design. Like, I am very particular about what dice system I use by the time I'm finally doing stuff. It's just like, you gotta build up to that, right? If you start worrying about all little details before you are sure that the thing you're making is fun, you're gonna have a rough time. Like you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to. You need to make sure that the skeleton is there before you start like building the walls or painting the windows or what have you.
Yeah, I very much agree. Me and Lilith have been working on our dungeon cleanup game, and like we still don't really know what the resolution system for that game is, but like
Hmm.
the details are there, the vibe is there, we have good
Yeah.
ideas, and I think that's the important part.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You gotta make like when you know that the thing like the play energy is there. People are sitting around and they're doing the thing and it's fun, and it's an enjoyable experience. Then you just gotta figure out how you can build that up so that other people can do it. But like you gotta make sure that like the experience is there. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Another question from this one from I believe she said she meant to sign it, so I'll say this is from Lilith. Speaking of,
Hi,
um,
Lola.
hi Lilith. Recently, I've been thinking about the tightness of a system. How do both of you feel about games that are tightly knit rather than more loose games? How do you feel, if at all? Um,
Um, I I'm not sure I know what distinction is being drawn here.
yes, I'd love some elaboration. If
Yeah,
you want to
and I
elaborate
think
in
that
chat, Lilith.
yeah, my immediate thought, right, is the difference between like maybe let's say, I don't know, GURPS is an extremely tight like is it like with GURPS a tight system or is it a big system, right? Like
Mhm.
is the Quiet Year a tight system or a loose system? Lasers and Feelings to me is loose, but I don't really know. I don't know, like it feels like it's a little like crunchy versus soft, where it's like there's a lot of different. It's much more. It feels very vibes oriented. So I think I need an example.
I think
The
it's
line
kind of
between board
like.
games and RPGs, where it's
Mhm.
like, okay, so to make sure I understand you right, like something like the Quiet Year and the Quiet Year would be a very tight game because there is like a very specific clear set of inputs and outputs, and you are just performing them in rote until the game reaches its conclusion. Like the narration, like Wickedness is a tight game in that sense, versus a loose game. It's like Lasers and Feelings, where there are no board game. There's no like you just kind of fucking whatever happens. Who gives a shit? You're just rolling a d6 sometimes. Is that an accurate assessment of tight versus loose? Yeah, I guess I'll wait for
Yeah,
the
there's a
chat.
slight delay.
There's always a delay. That's fine.
Yeah, it's an interesting distinction.
Yeah,
She
it's
says yeah.
tricky. It's cool. It's yeah. I mean, I think that like to me, it's interesting because I'm always chasing tactility, right? I emphasize tactility constantly. Yeah, For the Queen sounds very tight in this dichotomy. I'm always chasing tactility, right? And how do I produce a sensation, right? How do I teach you to find a sensation? And that's gonna be sometimes that's gonna be about creating a very tight, like a very, I'd say almost like a mechanics first experience, right? Where like we could maybe describe a lot of these games also as mechanics first, in which the mechanic is like rules are occurring and then we're deducing the fiction from them. Whereas there are other games that are fiction first, where fiction occurs and then from that we like deduce what should happen in the rules. Like Apocalypse World being one where something, like like you just kind of are free conversing until something happens. You're like, oh, that's a move. Let's key in the move, and then you pull in the mechanic, and then you go back to the fiction. Versus like For the Queen, which is just like mechanics, and sometimes you take breaks from mechanics to talk about the fiction that has revealed itself. And then Mordheim is a good example, I would say, maybe of like a board game that approaches a tabletop RPG in that way. And I don't know, I feel like they're all serving really useful purposes. They're all like, it's in different ways, right? One of them, like, which approach you take is going to vary tremendously based on what the game, like basically what you're trying to cultivate. Like Seven Part Pact is a very tight system in that sense, where it's very mechanics first, and that here is a intricate little model of the universe, and watch it spin and tick around. But then it flips that on its head with the magic, where the magic is entirely fictionally positioned, and you figure out what that does to the mechanics of the game. So it flows in one direction until suddenly it stops and flows the other way, and it pushes against the gears. And so there's like ways in which I think both sides of that are useful tools as a designer. You want to make sure you understand when the game, like almost like what direction the game is flowing in, right? Like, are the mechanics feeding into the fiction, which feed into the mechanics, or is it that there's the fiction and then it feeds into mechanics and that produces fiction? Like, what direction are these things flowing in? Is really, I think, important as a designer.
Yeah.
I'll warn you. Also, sometimes people use fiction first and mechanics first in different ways, which is incredibly frustrating because they'll just use it to mean other different things. But from my understanding, that is how I was taught those two words are meant to be used.
We live in a everyone's done their little blog about
Anyone know what
words.
simulationist means? Anyone knows what simulationist means?
Ha 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 he. Um
What's a game? Uh oh.
yeah, I like I think that's a good distinction. It made me think a lot about Jess's Planet Fist, where it's like a lot of the game is like kind of dancing between like you're doing turns with like specific kind of like numbers of actions that you can take, but then you're also like going like fiction first, and I think it's like
Mhm.
it's cool to see all the different ways that's been kind of explored. um,
Yeah.
and I always enjoy uh, getting to play a game and be like, okay, this is this sort of game.
Well, I think what's cool is that they're both really useful. They're both really useful tools, right? They're both they produce very different sets of experiences and sets of like. That's why I'm so focused on the tactility element of it, is because to me, they're both tactile mechanisms, right? And then it gets kind of furtherly an additional level of interesting if you also start thinking about like what are non-mechanical systems and what does it mean for those to be mechanics first. Like, what does it mean if you're like we are playing, like, what is the difference, I would say, between playing, like what are the other things that can be first besides mechanics or fiction, right? What are the other things that can get emphasized or be the center of play that then produce other things? What do those look like? Is very
Yeah,
interesting. Like, the
I've
thing that
said
comes up in LARP that doesn't come up in tabletop at all is physicality first, right? It's
right.
like what happens is what happens, right? And that's not really a thing in tabletop, but that's a thing in LARP. Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I haven't done much
Hmm.
LARP, so I'm definitely not uh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I, but the broadness of my games knowledge is kind of stifled by being a bit of a shut-in.
Correct. Most LARPs aren't good.
That's fair. But I was gonna say, I sent you Against the Apocalypse, right? Oleander Garden's weird like game where it's a bunch of tables that explain the physics of guns.
Oh, maybe I believe so.
Yeah, that game is, I think, like an interesting interesting like case because it is what it says it is. Like I talked to Oleander on the show about this. It is against the apocalypse in the sense that it is a like kind of tongue-in-cheek critique of Apocalypse World in the form of a game.
Hmm.
In the sense that it's like this is the absolute opposite of Apocalypse World, which is a mechanics first game where you have to like time out your steps through through the woods, and you have to like determine how fast your bullet is, and you know how deep it'll penetrate into someone's chest. Um, and I think
That's great.
there's yeah, there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun space to explore in terms of just like how weird can we get with it? How freaky can we get with it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Um, Shuddens rise up, walk to the kitchen to make tea, and sit back down. So true. The physicality is what makes Dread and Starcross such a clever hijack. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, it's what makes Ten Candles a masterpiece, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's the physicality, and it is, um, it's the thing that's like, it's that like the equivalent of simulation in LARP is immersion, right? Like when people talk about GNS in a LARP context, they talk about GNI, which, uh, like what immersion means in tabletop context, and certainly in a video game context, is completely different than what it means in a LARP context. Because in a LARP context, it is very much about like you are in the woods and you are running from a monster, and if you are not fast enough physically as a person to run from the monster, you get caught by the monster, right? Like that is not there is no game mechanic that is mediating this. There is no fiction. Like it's not like, oh, wouldn't it be great for your arc if you got away from the monster? It's like, no, you are in the woods and you are running. And that's the physical reality. And it's interesting because I think in tabletop games frequently when we talk about simulation, we talk about intricate mechanics, right? We're talking about these tables of bullets and we're talking about like these really, or like champions having to do calculus to figure out stuff in the game. But in LARP, those mechanics are they're anti-immersion, right? They get in the
Yeah.
way of feeling present. So an immersionist LARP does away with those. It's very minimalist because the goal is to get you physically present as much as possible. But they're both working towards that same agenda. They're both invested in the same feeling of a simulated world. It's just that the toolkit they're using is completely different. And
Yeah.
that's a
That's love games.
love games. I come back constantly to an article that was written called Six Degrees of Mechanical Abstraction,
Hmm.
which was an article written for a LARP journal, Knutpunkt. And it outlines, okay, so we can imagine, right, there's degrees of abstraction in terms of a game mechanic. And on one end of it is the least abstracted game mechanic in the world, which is like uh, uh, when I run from one end of the room to the other, my character has also run from one end of the room to the other, right? There's no abstraction.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
just
just fully
direct.
true. Yeah. And then you can abstract that where it's like, hey, we got rules against running here, so walk quickly to indicate that you're running.
Hmm.
And then, and like there's other abstractions like where like maybe if you are walking but you are doing so in this like kind of grotesque, exaggerated manner, that's running. Or maybe, like instead of running, you do something that symbolically represents running, right? Like if you've got super speed, maybe instead you can like fluidly dance from one end of the room to the other, and that indicates running like through super speed. And then you get to like the very abstract thing, the entirely abstract, and that is all just like, you instead of running, you like deal out a card or you roll a die or you describe yourself running. And all of tabletop RPG design exists in that far corner, right? It's an outline of all of the different levels of mechanical abstraction, to which there is a tiny corner that all RPG mechanics occupy. that they are a 6 and a 5 on this scale, and sometimes a 4 if you're lucky. And to me, that is just a testament to like how much RPGs have to learn to get out of their little provincialized little corner of game design. Is that there are entire frameworks of game design which treat all RPG mechanics as like one corner of a spectrum. And that is itself, I look at the 6 degrees of mechanical abstraction, I'm like, there is so much it could include that it doesn't.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, that is really like the idea that there is a that a teacher a person who only knows about teacher RPGs would, you know, would barely even have a scale to write about, right? Like,
Yes, exactly. Like you don't have you don't have you've got a binary at best between
hmm,
entirely abstract and somewhat abstract, which I guess is what we call the difference between describing doing an action and rolling the dice to do an action. Right? That would be the difference between mostly abstract and entirely abstract. Is did you roll a d20 to see if you could, or did you just describe yourself doing it?
this guy did
And
a voice.
right, yeah, that's like that is, and so like that's the far end of LARP, is like of like LARP mechanics, is like, oh, I found a piece of paper on the ground that says a rock fell on me, or
Hmm.
I rolled a d20 to see if a rock fell on me, right? Like those are the most abstract you can get in RPG in LARP, and that is 99% of mechanics in tabletop.
Yeah. Um, I don't know how much I can talk about this, but I wrote my Cobra challenge submission, um,
Ooh,
and it's about it's a LARP where there is a you bring a plant, and a plant can be anything from a blade of grass to a great and mighty tree, uh,
fantastic.
to the location. And part of the goal of the game is to make yourself believe that the plant is sort of a divine entity, uh, that you need to impress to receive its blessing, and that is the only thing you care about. Um, so it has like safety rules for like safety advice for like self grounding and stuff, as well.
That's great.
Um,
That's good. I love Golden Cobra. I'm so glad.
yeah, and then there's a funny. It's also really sexy. Is the other thing important thing about it? Like you're gonna be doing some weird shit around this plant. Um,
Yeah, I love
LARP's
that.
cool. I need to like do LARP and read LARP because I know there's some I know there's
There's a
some
lot that's
interesting stuff
very
there.
bad, but there's a lot that's really good out there.
Yeah. Um, we're at 47. I think. Let me see if there's
47.
anything left.
Yeah.
Do 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 do.
The problem with LARP, and I say this all the time, is that good LARP is better than good tabletop RPG, but bad LARP is so much worse than bad tabletop RPG, and the median is so much lower. So it's like when I say like most LARP is bad, it's really like a thing of like the good LARP is really good, but the bad LARP is so miserable, and you really gotta like wade through some like it's not like the good LARP is not in the boffer. It's not in the people hitting each other with swords in the park. It's not in the you gotta like really you're not gonna necessarily find it at cons. You really gotta like hunt for it. So it's a finding good LARP is a bitch.
Yeah. Well, because bad LARP is a bad LARP just becomes a bad thing that happened to you, right?
Yeah, well,
Uh,
'cause it's like if you go to if you play a bad tabletop game, or if you play a bad session of D&D, you've spent 3 hours, in a room with four other people who you did not have a good time with. Look, I don't want that. But if you have a
mhm.
bad LARP, you just spent a weekend you just maybe spent like $50 on a weekend in the woods with like 60 people you had a bad time with, right? Like just the misery quotient gets so much higher. I've had decent like I had like a LARP experience where I was like, that was a pretty decent experience. Where I spent where my I locked my pants in the bathroom, and I had to my boyfriend had to climb into the rafters to retrieve them, and I slept in a cabin during a rainstorm
Oh my
and on
god.
top of an air mattress and almost got frostbite. And I
Oh
was like, you know what? That was pretty nice. I think I'll go back to that one. And
shit.
I don't know. It's just like the standards are just different. It just hits different. So, oh, I mean that's Audiovore. That's not fair. They're both fucking horrendous. Bad World of Darkness LARP I think is better because it's gonna take less time. Um,
Fair.
like like LARP is better if it's lower risk, you know?
Yeah, I feel like I don't know. Something tells me that a bad. I feel like in the worst world of darkness LARP, you will actually exit with like some sort of occult disease.
That's still chlamydia. You'll get chlamydia.
Okay, cool.
It's not an occult disease. They will give you just a normal STI.
I'm learning so
The bad
much.
world of dark. Yeah, the bad world of darkness LARPs. You will. The bad world of darkness LARPs are also known as a kink munch, entirely populated by straight people.
Oh
This
yeah,
the Venn diagram of those two experiences is a circle. Um, so you know.
yeah. Um. Well, cool. I think we'll wrap up
On
there.
that note, right?
On that note,
Yeah.
on the get tested, kids.
Yeah.
Um, I
If you
think
go to a World of Darkness LARP and you don't have a good time, check for the clap.
yeah.
You heard it
Thank
from me. You heard it from Mama Jam.
thank you so much for being on, Jay. Oh God, hang on. Thank you so much for being on, Jay. Is there anything else that you would like to promote, like to gesture towards?
Check out the Possum Creek Patreon. It's really hard for me to promote it on Twitter, so I only really get to promote it in places like this. Support my
Yeah,
Patreon,
let me.
patreon.com/Possum Creek. I put my whole pussy into it. There's a lot of really cool stuff on there. I'm a charming, gregarious soul, and my game design matches that. You should come check it out.
Become
Um,
part.
Become part and play 7 per pack maybe, or just read it, or just come read my other stuff. I got a lot of stuff on there. Anyway, thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. That's it. That's my only promotional thing.
Hell yeah. We're gonna raid You Are Beheld. Strange little account. Really weird. Anyways,
Ooh,
six is
I love.
playing Space Station 14 over there. So go say
Oh
that.
hell yeah, hell yeah.
Hell yeah. All right. Um, take care, everyone, and bye bye.
Bye bye.
Remember, if you don't like what you
Yay.
see, you can change it. It's up to you, really. Goodbye, good luck, and have fun.